What's up, YouTube? It's the Jack Crypto Guy. Bitcoin is trading at $125,000. We hit an all-time high over the weekend, and I kind of want to give you my general take and what I think is going to happen next, because I think that this is a very fast-moving market, and nobody really saw this coming, especially on the weekend. And people typically don't really trust the weekend pumps just because it's a lot of low volume, there's a lot of manipulation that goes on, but obviously we're here on Monday and Bitcoin made a new all-time high, and it just continues to trade higher, and you have to ask yourself the question, why is this happening? Now, if you have been living under a rock, you would not know that the whole macro environment is super uncertain. We have a government shutdown, we have just max uncertainty when it comes to the dollar or any kind of fiat currency. And when you take that into account, you see precious metals surging in price, gold is just all-time high after all-time high. You have global liquidity going up. You have all sorts of just information overload across the board, and just you see all of these risk assets just they're kind of catching a bid. But I think more so than anything, we see the assets that are looked at as like a flight to safety or a way to opt out of the system. Those are all seemingly going higher and higher, which indicates a lot of uncertainty and just distrust when it comes to the governments. And so it's no surprise that Bitcoin is finally catching up. Obviously, Bitcoin was created out of the financial crisis in 2008. It was first launched in 2009. And I think that this is the perfect scenario and exactly what Bitcoin was created for. And I think that a lot of the governments know this. That's why there's so much pro-regulation when it comes to crypto and stablecoins. There's really no clear path to finance the debt or pay off the debt. And the debt ceiling just continues to get higher and higher. And not to mention that, fiat historically just goes to zero over time because there's just human greed, and people just, they can't really contain themselves. And so you see this infinite money printing no matter where you are in the world. You just see hyperinflation. And so in a world where that's just never going to change, I think that something as scarce as Bitcoin, where there's only 21 million in supply, and realistically speaking, there's probably close to 14 million because of how many people have either lost their wallets or passed away. I think that you cannot ignore the value proposition that Bitcoin has. And you have to kind of ask yourself the question, should I trust this new technology? And I say new, relatively speaking, because Bitcoin's only been around since 2009. It's do you want to hold on to your dollars and, pretty much lose 20% of your purchasing power every single year? Do you want to speculate into gold, because that's also going to all-time highs? And gold has a really high market cap. It's in the tens of trillions of dollars, and people don't really want to denominate their net worth in any kind of fiat currency. And so even if you have gold, you want to have something that can kind of scale with whatever the inflation is or whatever the case may be. And so that's why Bitcoin, in my opinion, is catching such a bid, and I think it's going to have a massive catch-up trade when it comes to the price of gold. That's always what happens in these 4-year cycles. So I predict that Bitcoin is going to go into the 200,000 range probably by year end, or probably in the first quarter of next year. And it would be really interesting to see how that all shakes out, because obviously we're in a place where the monetary system is kind of changing. We have interest rates that are going to continue to decrease. We have the dominance of the dollar dropping, and it just kind of paves the way of cheap money. And so when that happens, you tend to see a lot of risk on assets catching a lot of attention, because people are kind of abandoning the dollar. And so what happens is they want to speculate on something that's going to combat inflation and increase their purchasing power over time, which basically means that they're able to buy more, or their dollar goes farther, or whatever currency that they're holding. So I predict a massive bull trend that's going to continue throughout 2026. Obviously, I'll update you guys if anything changes, but I wouldn't discount the human greed and the sort of propping of the economies, because we all know that the economies are horrible. But when you talk to the government or the presidents, they always say, oh, things are so good, things are going to continue to get better, we have a path to sustainability, or whatever the case may be. But that's really just a facade to kind of hide what's actually going on. And I think the banks also see this. That's why they're so predatory when it comes to cryptocurrency and all of that. But now we have a lot of pro-regulation where they're not going to be able to discriminate against anybody that's holding Bitcoin or trying to transact with crypto. And I think that stable coins are going to be a way to either offset the dollar or integrate with the new system. And I think that historically over time, every fiat usually dies around 100 years, and we're pretty much coming up on that mark when it comes to the US dollar. And the US dollar has basically been used, in my opinion, in a very draconian way to keep as a world reserve currency and keep all the power. But I think that a lot of people are losing interest and faith in this system. So what happens? And when you look at how the governments are all positioning these stable coins, they're still going to be denominated in US dollars. And what happens is whenever you transact in crypto, I think that, wherever you are in the world, right? Like if you're in like the, America or Dubai or China, whatever the case may be, people still tend to transact in the, USDT Tether, USDC Circle, things of that nature. And so that it's kind of forcing them to still have the dollar. And in my opinion, you could consider taking profits into that, but then again, your underlying asset is still going to be the dollar. I have always been really bullish on Bitcoin, so I like to denominate my net worth in Bitcoin or Satoshis or whatever the case may be. And so I'm going to be using this trend to use altcoins to speculate to gain faster on Bitcoin, but then I'm going to try to convert my altcoins into Bitcoin to accumulate more. And then I do think that we're going to inevitably go into some sort of bearish trend. I don't think it's going to be exactly the same. I think that all these Bitcoin treasuries and spot ETFs, it's creating a infinite bid on anything that has a spot ETF or treasury. So I would really look into those assets. And if you're not in assets that have these kinds of backings, I would really suggest, mitigating the risk in case we do go into a bearish trend, because those coins are going to go down the most. And the ones that have, spot ETFs or whatever the case may be, those probably won't go down as much. And I think it'll be a longer, bullish trend, so to speak. So I hope this content helps you. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section. I have newly created this channel, so as soon as I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to be doing a giveaway. So make sure you share this content with a friend, like the content to get this out to the algorithm, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.